Every tear, every night I cried. Let me hear where I'm alive. No one ever stood for me before, but they're standing now and here I soar.
Welcome back to Behind the Bruises. I'm your host, Candy Morrow. Today I'm joined by someone who fights for people at their most vulnerable moments. Attorney Emily Marshall is a compassionate and powerful advocate who represents individuals and families in catastrophic injury and wrongful death cases across Georgia. With more than a decade of experience in high-stakes litigation, she brings not just legal expertise, but heart and strategy, and unwavering commitment to justice. Emily has worked at the highest level of the legal world, guiding Fortune 500 companies and protecting everyday people whose lives were forever changed. But what makes her so meaningful to this conversation is her dedication to giving a voice to those who have been harmed, overlooked, or silenced. Emily, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you being here.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Anytime.
Thank you.
I just want to give a little caveat here. Emily is not a family practice attorney, but she's well-versed in the law and is going to give us some of her perspective and ideas as to what we can do regarding domestic violence. So let's get started.
Okay.
You did the research for my book on the history of domestic violence and where it came from, and drew out probably 20 or 30 law books and dug through it. Can you kind of explain what surprised you when you did that research?
Yeah, what really surprised me is that the law even pretended to treat domestic violence as a real issue. And it's been an ongoing issue for decades.
When you say pretended, what do you mean pretended? Huh?
Well, I guess pretend from the sense that it's, when it would go up to Congress, some of the Congress people would provide lip service to it.
Okay.
But never really take the step to take the action to actually protect those who are abused.
Okay.
And not only in the government, but also, in other areas where it was just so long that abuse inside the home was just brushed off as a private matter.
What year did that take you back to? Was it in the 90s or the 80s or, what?
I would say it was probably back in the 60s when it started on the forefront.
Okay.
When women started to come forward.
Oh, okay.
But the thing is that, with how the culture was back then, and where women, wives were outside of the home did not have a lot of identity.
Okay.
So throughout time with the women's movement and other changes and other evolution in the law, it allowed us to finally in the 1990s, bring up this legislation. But before then, even marital rape was still legal it was legal in some states, but only until the 1990s did all states make marital rape illegal.
Really?
Where they banned it. So it took that long. It took into the 1990s for all states to come to the table and recognize that this was an issue, even within a family unit.
Wow.
It really showed me, at the end of the day, how hard fought this protection was. Yeah. From all facets of, women coming forward and also, advocates and other individuals.
What year was it that it was signed, the Women Against Domestic Violence? It's in the book, but I can't remember exactly what year it was. Clinton was in office.
Yes, so that was in the 1990s.
Okay.
It was the 1990s. But it just raises the issue of why did it take so long?
Yeah.
Why did it take so long? And how many lives could have been improved, or even saved.
Exactly. Wow. When a woman is contemplating leaving her abuser, what documents would you suggest that a woman have before leaving that are important to help her?
Okay, so...
and her children,
Sure. So what I want to caveat or start off with is so long as this is safe, than to go about doing this.
Okay.
Safety is always a priority.
Absolutely.
So if it is safe to gather documents, and again, I'll say that documents can make a huge difference, both for the protection and for also helping, the person to rebuild their life.
Okay.
I would say, if possible, obviously take your ID, your social security card if you have it, your passport if you do have that. If you have children, your children's records, their
Like their health records?
Their health records, if you have them. A lot of those are digital now. But if you have physical copies of birth certificates, school documents, anything like that, that would be good to hold on to. Also, financial paperwork, whether it be, just the account numbers.
Oh, so like your bank account or whatever? Okay.
Yeah, and also the passwords.
Okay, yeah.
To get into if it is online. Typically, courts and lawyers and I guess the justice system in general, they do rely heavily on written records. And so
do they?
They do. The survivor's truth, I want to say that, is still valid without documentation. But victims can gather those documents in a way that doesn't necessarily raise attention of the abuser.
Yeah, make sure she's safe. Yeah.
I would recommend those types of documents.
Okay.
And really, they're just identifying documents.
Okay, so it's for identification. For instance, like if he finds out that she's left and he calls someone or whatever, the police, and said she's kidnapped the children or whatever, she can prove these children are hers.
Right.
Is that right? Okay.
That's correct.
Okay.
That raises a different issue of, kidnapping and custody issues, and I guess we can get into that later. And sometimes that raises a concern. It's identifying paperwork and also, financial.
Okay.
To make sure that, if you're not sticking money underneath the mattress, and if it's in a bank somewhere, make sure to have those account numbers and also the passwords.
Okay. Okay. Good. Yeah, and then photos. Are they important to have? Like, just in like an everyday photo, is that necessary or?
Photos would be good, I guess, for children for identifying purposes.
Okay.
And to the extent you do want to gather photos to take with you, for sure. But, if you have an ID, that basically is an identifying photo of yourself. But you're right, if there are photos of your children, that would be important too. If you mean photos of proof of physical abuse, that definitely is something that courts would pay attention to.
Okay.
And to the extent that those are electronic photos, typically what is stored on electronically is metadata. And so what the technology now is they can go into the metadata to determine
Define what metadata is for those that may not understand.
So I'm not really a techie either, but the metadata is kind of like the underlying history of what a document or something, something that is online, like a photo.
Okay.
So it's basically a file. So what can be determined is when it was taken.
Oh, okay.
And so that can kind of document a chronology of, a history of abuse.
Okay.
And that's
like on some photos it has like the date and then the time and all of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
A lot of, but now with forensics, there are a lot of, experts that are out there that can, dig underneath those documents and those photos to determine, what that metadata is, who, when it was captured.
Oh.
And so, like I said, helping to build a chronology or a history of abuse, that certainly would be helpful for not only attorneys, but also for, courts to see in the event it escalated to that. So
hopefully it wouldn't. What legal papers should she understand, like leases, insurance, identification, health records? Are those, papers that she should have also too when she plans to leave or is able to leave safely? So
health records are a little bit different because you can always go and request your records from a healthcare provider. I think that the law is, I want to say, the document retention for medical providers is 7 years. So to the extent that there might be a danger or the abused might be at risk for gathering that type of information for the viewers, just so that they know that they can always request that information, those records from the medical providers up to 7 years. And sometimes medical providers will keep the information for longer.
Okay.
So that's one thing. Another thing would be insurance, lease information if you are on a lease for an apartment or,
And what is that lease going to show? That you're an occupant of that apartment or home or whatever?
Correct, yeah. Or if you're an owner of a home, if you're a co-owner with, I guess, an abuser, it would be important for someone to understand what the loan documents are, where they are, who's actually on the loan, if there is a loan on the home, also the insurance carrier, and also, the deed. And you can find, some of this information that's recorded through the courts, and you can typically find anything that, as far as if you have a mortgage on a home, that's always recorded in the county court of where you reside.
So you can contact the county courthouse and get these documents?
Yes, and if you can't get it online, you can get most things online, but if you can't, you can always go down to the courthouse and request it. But there are actually sometimes you don't necessarily have to do that. You can do that online.
Okay.
So
just look up under whatever county you're in, that particular courthouse in the county that you're in, and it will give you options to.
It varies by state.
Okay.
So based on here in Georgia, so we're in Fulton County. So I would go to Fulton County. It's usually the tax assessor's website. Only because they control the property taxes. So they have all of that information. And also if the deed or something is recorded, I want to say it's in the Superior Court of Fulton County. So it really just depends on the jurisdiction that you're in. But I think if your viewers are good at Googling and stuff, if you know the county that you're in, and just put into either, I don't know, even into Google or even ChatGPT and asking, it might spit out,
what would you
some
say?
good directions.
What would you put in there to ask?
So in Google, I would just say whatever county and then the state property tax records.
Okay, property tax records.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you could go to ChatGPT and say, hey, I need to find this type of document.
Okay.
Where do you think I should go? This is where I live.
Okay.
And then it'll spit out.
Okay.
AI is really great for that.
Okay.
Sometimes it's wrong, but at least it'll give you a starting
everybody
point.
thinks it's right.
Yeah. So you always have to double check, but at least it's a starting point. So.
Okay, all right. Who are the safest people to tell when you're preparing to leave? And why is a safety plan so important?
So the safest people to tell would be those that are least connected to the abuser.
Okay.
That have the furthest distance of a relationship with that abuser. Because presumably those individuals would be able to keep things confidential because they don't have a regular interaction with the abuser.
Okay.
So that would be a trusted friend, or a therapist, if you tell them, or a domestic violence advocate.
Okay.
You could also seek, assistance through a church, something like that. Something where they will keep what you tell them confidential.
Okay.
Hotlines can help too, but again, those are over the phone and they can only do so much.
Right.
A safety plan is important only because leaving is a high-risk moment, and a plan helps you to think through. What makes it
so high risk? Why, what makes it high risk?
We don't know what the abuser's going to do.
Okay.
And from that standpoint, that lack of predictability,
okay,
you want as much predictability as possible.
Okay.
When you're looking to leave.
Okay.
And so having a plan in place, you could have plan A and actually maybe a plan B would be helpful. But knowing that will help you.
Okay.
Because it helps you put something on paper or in your mind.
Yeah.
It helps you think about the abuser's habits, the times.
Okay, yeah.
Things of that nature that would go into play into putting together a safety plan.
Yeah.
And so that's what's important about it, having a plan, is because it forces you to analyze all of the moving parts in order to have a really good sense and bring you confidence in getting ready to leave.
Yeah, because it's so scary.
It is.
When you're leaving.
Yeah, so and with anyone, I mean, even with anything, if you're prepared, it takes off that stress. It takes off even just that little amount of stress. Leaving is hard enough.
Yeah.
So why not make it less stressful and have a plan in place?
Yeah. I like your idea of a plan B, because if plan A doesn't work, let's say, he doesn't usually come home at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, but all of a sudden he shows up.
Yeah.
And your plan was to leave during that window of time. You've got a plan B to fall back on.
Right.
That doesn't send you into a tailspin, there, because you're already stressed to the max as it is.
Right.
There when you're trying to leave.
Yeah. So, and it also helps you, especially when children are involved, and if they're in school or if they're school age, or, custody issues and if there's anything like that, then you really definitely need to have a plan in place. Because not only do we have the victim who is, the abuse, but it's also the children and so it's always helpful to have something in place for that.
And usually the abuser is so manipulative, and they know that that's going to get to the core of the mom, is to use the children.
Oh, yes.
They're very good at that.
They are very good at that. I can speak firsthand about that. Yes. Yes.
Why do you think the decision to leave is often the most dangerous and the most emotionally complex? I know you kind of answered that a little bit earlier, but do you have anything to add to that?
I think that a lot of, and just in my experience, a lot of what happens is it's this control.
Okay.
So when you leave, you're basically threatening their control. And that's just something to consider, because that's when things escalate.
Okay.
So many of the most serious injuries or deaths happen during separation. And so going back to having a plan in place, that's where it's super important, just to make sure that you're doing as much as you can at the front end. Emotionally, it's complicated because, as messed up as it is, it's hard to leave.
Yeah.
It might be just the shittiest situation in the world, but it might be stable, whatever stable is for people. And so that's what's so scary. And the trauma of leaving and being on your own, the fear.
Yeah.
It's very scary. And again, I think that just makes me want to hammer home again the plan that you have in place. And also, it's helpful to understand emotionally why you're making this decision to leave. And to just remind yourself.
That's a very good point. You need to really understand why you're making this decision to leave. Because when you're in that craziness, you kind of make things up in your mind. Well, he'll get better. He won't hit me again. I remember how it was in the beginning. I think he could get back to that.
Yeah.
That sort of thing.
Exactly.
Because it's scared enough being in the house with an abuser. Just as scary to walk out the door with your children on your hip or walking beside you when you don't know what's out there.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, it's scary.
And that's when you really need that person that you confided in to kind of keep telling you, it's okay. You're going to be okay.
Right.
You're going to get to the shelter. They're going to take care of you.
Right. Yeah. And for you, and the plan, I guess, and I'm going off on a tangent, but, a plan also could entail something, it makes me think of you, where you had this other focus. You had this focus of getting your nursing degree and obtaining that.
Yeah.
And so from the standpoint that, it is scary and it's emotionally traumatic and it can be sad, but think of something that you could do for yourself to make to build your own identity. And for me, at least, that's where I put my focus.
Okay.
And sometimes that was what helped me get by. And in reading your book, it felt like that's kind of how nursing school was for you, is having that focus, because that was just for us. You know, me going to law school, that was for me. That was making myself better. And so it's a focus on not only, it's scary to leave, but it's also a great opportunity to grow. And to build your own identity.
Very good point. Very good point.
So,
because at least you have an end point. You know, if you could, when you got your law degree, you'll be able to make money. You'll be able to do things that you like to do. Because I know how you love the law.
I do. Yeah, and I know how you love, you know, taking care of people.
Right. Yeah.
And so if I could convey to any of your viewers how important it is, you know, that how important these women, whoever you are, you're so important. And if you have a goal or objective, don't give up on it. Focus and use that as your focus. Use it as your hope. To get
as your hope. I like that.
Yeah,
I like that. Thank you. Because every state handles domestic violence differently, which is insane. What key question should a survivor ask when seeking help? Or should they just turn to an accurate, trustworthy person, for information? I mean, I know we have all the hotlines now, and so on that we can call, but some people are afraid to call a hotline.
Yeah.
Because once that makes it real. When they make the call, that hotline center is going to put things in motion to get you and your children safe.
Right.
So once you do that, you're committed to packing your suitcase and leaving. So is there someone in between, or that you would trust, that you could go to and say, I just need somebody to talk to today?
I think that, to the extent that there are, therapists or,
Do
good
lawyers
friends.
allow you to come and sit and talk with them and, and say, this is my situation? Because they're not going to tell anybody because they're not allowed to legally, right?
Right. There probably are. I'm not aware of any here in, that are dedicated to, domestic violence per se. But I feel like, I'm actually a volunteer for, it's called the Atlanta Volunteer Lawyers Foundation.
Okay.
And so, unfortunately, it's where, individuals come where they can't afford to get, legal.
Oh, okay. So they can get free advice there.
Yeah, they can. And
do you think there's like that in every state? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, there probably are. So if they're not advertising as domestic abuse, legal help, you could just, call look up a legal aid society within your jurisdiction where you live.
Okay.
And then if you call them, they would probably be able to provide you with information. If they can't help you, they could probably provide you with some phone numbers or contact information for maybe some, charities or foundations that potentially could help you.
Okay. All right. Great.
Yeah.
All right. For listeners who may not fully understand, can you explain it in simple terms what a restraining order is and what it's meant to do?
So a restraining order is basically where you go to the court and you ask the court to restrain or prevent. It's basically an injunction. An injunction means that you can't do something.
Okay.
So it's basically you're going to the court and you're asking the court. You're saying, Your Honor, I need for some space to be between this person and myself.
So you can do that. You don't need an attorney to do that. You can.
My understanding is that you can. You can go and go. Probably.
I know it's different from state to state.
It is, but if you are able to, what I would recommend is going to your police department, your local police department, and they might be able to help you.
Okay.
Fill out paperwork.
Okay.
But it does depend on each jurisdiction. And so the restraining order basically prevents an individual from coming within a certain distance of you, and they cannot, come to your home. It really just depends. And you can make the terms. You can ask the court to adjust the terms in some jurisdictions. I'm not sure how it is in others. So if they're...
When you say terms, what do you mean?
Well, if if you don't want this person coming around at work, you identify that. If there's a place that you frequent a lot and your abuser knows that, make sure and include that.
Okay.
And so it's just important to know, where you go to make sure that that person is not
going. Okay.
So
be to pick up the children at daycare or, whatever too.
And it's important also to know that restraining orders in Georgia, they call them, what do they call it? Yeah, they do call them restraining orders. That they can be temporary. And so you need to make sure that if you do get a restraining order, you need to make sure to read it, understand it, and understand how long the restraining order, the duration of that order is.
Okay.
Because
some could
once
be 30 days, some could be 6 months.
Exactly.
Okay.
Because once it ends,
you're free game.
Yes. And so and actually I was on a hearing where, someone was reapplying to extend it. Judges will extend it. Absolutely. But they won't extend it unless you ask.
Okay.
Because
it's not automatically.
Exactly. It's not on their radar.
Okay.
And so
they're so busy with all the other docket things that they have.
Yeah.
There. What kind of documentation as evidence is helpful when you're filing a restraining order? Do you need any documents when you file a restraining order?
It depends on the jurisdiction, but typically, if you can show, it depends on what, if they're stalking you, but in this case, if there are signs of physical abuse, obviously photos. But in my experience, when I've been in on hearings, typically the judge will take your testimony about what is going on, and they will definitely take that into account. So don't necessarily worry that if you don't have certain amount of photographs or documentation that it's not going to happen.
Impede you from getting
if you are living in fear, and even if you don't have bruises, the judge, more than likely, the judge would grant
an order for a
restraining order.
Let's say my abuser came in, harmed me, that sort of thing, and that later that afternoon I decided I'm going to go to the police department, I'm going to report it. Is it best to have that police report, that you can take to the judge and say, I went to the police and here's my documentation that he hurt me on this day?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, definitely. Yeah. If you've been to the police and if you've gotten reports, absolutely. Any kind of documentation is helpful.
Okay.
Especially from a law enforcement or, any kind of legal document, because obviously, the courts would be able to pull that too from the law enforcement agency.
I know some states have their own, at their police department, they have their own section for domestic violence, which I think is, fantastic. I just came across this. My understanding is there's supposedly one in the state of Georgia, but it's not really utilized or organized, too well. But I know in the state of Connecticut, they have a department for domestic violence, and I've spoken to some domestic violence survivors up there, and they said that helped. They helped them so much because they went to that police department. And they guided that survivor through every step of the way because you're dealing with so much grief and so much fear and all of these thoughts in your head. You really can't think straight, and these police officers led these women through all the steps that they needed to take to get the restraining order, to do various different things, and I would be a huge advocate for every state.
Yeah.
To have that,
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that because I feel like, it is the leaving is one thing, but like knowing the process of leaving is a totally different thing.
Yeah.
So having someone to help guide you, especially given, especially because no case is the same, right?
Right.
All, people's circumstances are different.
Totally,
and so that's great. I would love to know where the Georgia one is.
There is one here. Well, I spoke with Jean Douglas about it, the executive director of the Domestic Violence Center here, and on the podcast that I had with her, a couple of weeks ago, she, had mentioned that there was one here, because I had just gotten back from a book signing in Connecticut, and there's a dear friend, there's Dr. Jennifer Jose and her husband. They own a gym, as well as her medical practice. She's internal medicine. And he was a retired New York City police officer. And so now they live in Stamford. And so he was telling me all about this, and I was just so surprised. And I asked him, I said, is this throughout the country? And he said he didn't really know. He said New York does have one as well, but the one in Connecticut is really ran, very sharply there. But
that's really,
it's something I really want to follow up on further and see if I can't be an advocate. At some point, I'd like to be able to speak with police departments.
Yeah.
To help them understand domestic violence, the complexity of it.
Yeah.
Because there's a fear coming from their end, walking up to a door, they don't know what's behind it.
Right, exactly.
So I can understand that as well. What are the biggest challenges survivors face once they decide to involve the law enforcement?
The problem with law, the law is great, but it can go either way, right? And so when you get the law involved, you lose control, because then the law, the law takes over. So, and so they may fear, retaliation. There's, a chance.
You mean
the abused.
Okay.
So there might be some fears of retaliation, fears of or not being believed.
Yeah, that's a big one.
And, there might be language or cultural barriers, immigration consequences, especially nowadays. Right. Some worry that the abuser will manipulate the system, or that the officers won't understand non-physical abuse, which, I think we can both attest to.
Oh, yeah.
And, manipulating the system. So you have to be aware of that. And so the law is what it is. The people that are in legal enforcement and in the judiciary, they're people too, they're human. So you just have to take that into account. And so, like you said, if there is an advocate, in different states or in your city or in your county that can help you walk you along, that would really help the survivor to navigate.
Yeah. That's why I think that I understand there's the fear behind calling, the hotline for domestic violence, but they have so many resources, now for the abused and their children and that sort of thing. And that would give them some comfort, So I encourage everyone, please call the 1-800 hotline number. Those people are usually fantastic.
Yeah.
And you can get in touch with them in every state.
Yeah. I agree.
Why do some cases get dismissed even when the abuse is obvious? You got a woman standing there shaking in fear in front of a judge, and then you got, the abuser sitting there with his attorney, and she's so scared of losing the children or losing, her life or whatever, and it gets thrown out of court.
So cases are dismissed for a lot of reasons, and that have absolutely nothing to do with whether the abuse happened. It's evidentiary rules, depending on, what type of evidence, sometimes stuff can just get thrown out depending on, different rules of evidence.
Okay.
If there are prosecutors that are overloaded, your case may not take priority, and it just may be put to the side. And there also, unfortunately might be harmful, some stereotypes about how a real victim should act. I'm not really sure if I've ever met a victim who acts the same. I think we all carry, what has happened in different ways. Yeah. But there is a real risk for that. Especially in front of, a judge. That happened to me.
He's got a stack of dockets,
yes.
Or filings that they need to get through that day.
Yeah. But so what helps is to be clear, is to have a clear timeline, supporting documents like we talked about, being consistent. And then, at times, you could ask, have an expert, testify as to, what type of trauma you went through and the effects of it. Mm-hmm. But it boils down to, in my experience, preparation and sticking to the facts.
Okay.
And so if you stick to the facts, if you keep documentation as best as you can,
I've known
that will
some
help
survivors that have kept a diary, but that always is kind of fearful to me because the abuser could find that diary.
Yeah. So just make sure
It
that you
just
put
seems
it in
like
a place.
the law sometimes is against us. You know,
Yeah.
but like you said, there's a lot of emotion into it as well.
There is.
So you need to stick to the facts.
There is, yeah. And so if anything, that's what I would encourage the viewers is to stick to the facts because, you know, they're going to see the emotion. They're going to see, you know, what has happened. But if you can stick to the facts and have a chronology and, you know, photographs, like I said, documentation, or, you know, if you don't, even if it's just your word against that other person's, still try to stick to the facts.
Okay.
It'll get you further.
Okay.
So.
All right. How does domestic violence affect custody decisions? Like custody of the children? What rights do mothers have when the father's abusive?
It really just depends. I think it's a case by case basis, really. And sometimes, I mean, this would be in domestic, you know, it depends on whether, I don't know. I mean, if the abuser is being prosecuted in a criminal, I mean, or if not, or if there are just allegations, you know, it's just so messy. But if there is definitive proof of domestic violence, you know, in my experience, you know, the judges will certainly take that into consideration. But just know that, you know, you do need to have substantial proof or documentation about that.
Because I would think that, you know, like you said, you take the emotion out of it and stick to the facts.
Right.
So the judge is looking at this statute or this law or that law that says X, Y, and Z. It doesn't include any of the, you know, well, he took my, you know, shoes and burned them in the backyard.
Right.
You know, type of thing. There's no law for that.
Yeah.
You know, the fact is he was abusive to you, and this is what we need to prove.
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
So with that being said, it would be helpful to have a family law attorney who knows the laws and knows what your, you know, what your burden of proof is, and then also what, you know, what kind of evidence you would need, you know, in order to protect your children.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, that's what we want to do.
Exactly.
We just want to protect our children. So
that's the bottom line.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then that's why I think another reason why the 1-800 hotline number is so great is because they will put you in contact with lawyers that will help you and shelter your children.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay, as an attorney who clearly understands domestic violence, what would you say to a woman listening who feels terrified, hopeless, and stuck?
I want them to know that they are not alone, that there are a lot of us that have gone through different kinds of abuse, and we've come out the other end. And it's not hopeless.
Yeah.
You need to be hopeful.
Yeah.
And I also want them to know that being abused is not your fault. And I want them to feel validated in how they've been abused. And just know that there is, again, I just would want them to know that there's hope for a better life.
I think that's the biggest, most powerful word that there's hope.
Yeah.
Because, you know, when you're abused, you don't know that there is hope.
No, you don't.
You don't really even know if you matter or not.
Yeah. But I think the first step for women or for anyone who's been abused is to take stock of what their life is and what their life situation is, and really figure out a plan and make a decision. Am I going to leave? And if I'm going to leave, how am I going to do it? Take it step by step. That way you're not overwhelmed with the whole process. Call that hotline, get some help, get some feedback about your situation and how best to go about leaving. And then figure out a long-term plan.
Yeah.
What do you want to do? What have your goals been?
Yeah.
Put yourself first, because if you don't, no one else will.
That's right.
And if you take care of yourself and if you have children, then your children will be taken care of as well.
You bet.
So.
You bet. Emily, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I so appreciate your legal advice and all of your kindness. Would you please come back anytime?
Absolutely.
Yay,
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Emily, for sharing your expertise and perspective with us today. Your words offered strength, validation, and hope. I'm truly honored you joined us for this important conversation. And to all of you listening to this episode of Behind the Bruises, thank you. Remember to tune in every other Tuesday for a new episode wherever you get your podcast. Don't forget to leave a review, a like, a comment, and subscribe. As always, I would love to hear from you. Until next time, remember, you matter.
Now one more hour. Oh, no more taking away her power. Not one more day, her new theme. She's living wide awake in a dream.